Here's a couple more difficult examples if you're struggling in class today. So when you're solving for zeros, let's say I was going to solve this one. I'm trying to get x by itself again. I'm looking for the solutions, and I'm just solving for x. So in order to undo square root, or I'm sorry, in order to undo square, you're going to do plus or minus the square root, plus or minus the square root. Well, when I go to take the square root of negative 400 in my calculator, I get an error because there's two things you can never do in math: divide by 0, and the other thing is take the square root of a negative. So this is actually no solution because you can't take the square root of negative 400. And let me show you why. So if you looked at this, let's say we were going to solve this by the graph method. If I wanted to solve this by the graph method, I would have to get it equal to 0. So it would actually be this function. Well, if you remember, this would mean up 400. So if you were going to graph this, it would be facing up, and its starting position on the y-axis would be here at 400, 0, 400, and it would look like this. Think about that. It's never going to cross this x-axis. Therefore, you don't have any solutions because what you're actually solving for, remember, whenever you're solving, is solving for where it's going to cross the x and y-axis. So another example. I'm trying to get x by itself. So the first thing I need to do is I need to add 24. And this is different because the 24 isn't in parentheses. The 24 isn't being squared, so I can't take the square root yet. I've got to move the 24 to the other side. And when I do that, I get 36. And now here, I've got x squared. So now I have to take the square root because, again, 24 wasn't being squared, so I had to move it out of the way before I started taking the plus or minus the square root of both sides. And when I do this, I get positive and negative 6. So the ordered pairs are 6, 0, and negative 6, 0. Another one. So again, the x is the only thing being squared here, so I need to move 400 to the other side. So when I move 400, I get the square root of negative 400 again, which you can't do, so it's no solution. And I already told you why you can't do that. Another example. Here I can't add 5 yet because 5 is having the square, it's being squared. So now I've got to get rid of the square first by taking the square root, only because 5 is also being squared. So when I do that, that takes that off, and I'm left with x minus 5. And over here, I've got positive and negative, the square root of 40. Well, that doesn't come out even. So I'm going to have to break it down over here, which means I'm going to get an ugly ordered pair again. This breaks down to 4 and 10. 4 breaks down to 2 and 2. 10 breaks down to 2 and 5. 2 leaves. That 2 and 5 have to stay, which gives me 10. So I should get positive and negative 2 square root of 10 here. So this is where I break it apart, because I have x minus 5 is equal to positive 2 square root of 10. And then I have x minus 5 is equal to negative 2 square root of 10. So I'm still solving for x, still trying to get x by itself. I'm going to add 5 to both sides. My answer looks like this because you can't add those together. If you remember, they're not like radicals, so they're not like terms, so you can't add them together. So my ordered pair for the positive is this one. It's super ugly. It's not something you would be able to graph. Remember, we're finding exact answers here. So on this side, I'm going to add 5 again. Should get another ugly ordered pair because I can't add these together. So it would be 5 minus 2 square root of 10. 0. One last example. Don't jump ahead of the game and automatically assume it's going to be no solution. You don't know that until you're actually taking the square root of a negative. And my first step here should not be taking square root, but it should be getting rid of this negative 2 because this negative 2 out front is not being squared. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2 before I start. Left over on this side is x minus 1 squared because I haven't done anything to get rid of that yet. And here I get positive 8. So now I need to get rid of the square because I can't add 1 yet because it's being squared. Plus or minus the square root. And I get x minus 1 on this side. And on this side I get plus or minus whatever the square root of 8 is. Well, 8 breaks down to 4 and 2. 4 breaks down into 2 and 2. 2 doesn't break down. So that's 2 square root of 2. Alright, so I'm going to x minus 1 is equal to positive 2 square root of 2. And x minus 1 is equal to negative 2 square root of 2. So just solve your equation still. Gotta get x by itself, so add 1, add 1. So x is equal to 1 plus 2 square root of 2. Because you can't add them together, they're not like radicals. And then add 1, add 1. X is equal to 1 minus 2 square root of 2. So that'd be 1 minus 2 square root of 2, 0.